I didn't want to be different. I longed to be everything grown-ups wanted so that they would love me. I followed all their rules, tried my best to please, but there was something about me that made them knit their eyebrows and frown. No one ever offered a name for what was wrong with me. That's what made me afraid it was really bad. I only came to recognize its melody through this constant refrain. Is that a boy or a girl? I was one more bad card life had dealt my parents. They were already bitterly disappointed people. My father had grown up determined he wasn't going to be stuck in a factory like his old man. My mother had no intention of being trapped in a marriage. When they met, they dreamed they were going on an exciting adventure together. When they awoke, my father was working in a factory, and my mother had become a housewife. When my mother discovered she was pregnant with me, she told my dad she didn't want to be tied down with a kid. My father insisted she'd be happy when she had the baby. Nature would see to that. My mother had me to prove him wrong. My parents were enraged that life had cheated them. They were furious that marriage blocked their last opportunity to escape. When I came along, and I was different. Then I came along, and I was different. Now they were furious with me. I could hear it in the way they retold the story of my birth. Rain and wind had lashed the desert while my mother was in labor. That's why she gave birth to me at home. The storm was too violent to be forded. My father was at work, and we had no phone. My mother said she wept so loudly in fear when she realized I was on the way that the Diné grandmother from across the hall knocked on the door to see what was wrong, and then realizing my birth was imminent, brought 3 more women to help. The Diné woman sang as I was born. That's what my mother told me. They washed me, fanned smoke across my tiny body, and offered me to my mother. Put the baby over there, she told them, pointing to a bassinet near the sink. Put the baby over there. These words chilled the Indian woman. My mother could see that. The story was retold many times when I was growing up, as though the frost that bearded those words could be melted by repeating them in a humorous, ironic way. Days after I was born, the grandmother knocked on our door again, this time because my cries alarmed her. She found me in the bassinet, unwashed. My mother admitted she was afraid to touch me, except to pin on a diaper or stick a bottle in my mouth. The next day, the grandmother sent over her daughter, who agreed to keep me during the day while her children were at school, if that was all right. It wasn't. My mother was relieved, I'm sure, although at the same time it was an indictment of her. But she let me go. So I grew up with 2 words, immersed in the music of 2 languages. One world was of Wheaties and Milton Berle. The other was fry bread and sage. One was cold, but it was mine. The other was warm, but it wasn't. My parents finally stopped letting me travel across the hall when I was 4. They came to pick me up before dinner one night. A number of the women had cooked a big meal and brought all the children together for the feast. They asked my parents if I could stay. My father grew alarmed when he heard one of the women say something to me in a language he did not understand, and I answered her with words he'd never heard before. He said later he couldn't stand by and watch his own flesh and blood be kidnapped by Indians. I've only heard bits and pieces about that evening, so I don't know everything that went on. I wish I did. But this part I've heard over and over again. One of the women told my parents I was going to walk a difficult path in life. The exact wording changed in the retelling. Sometimes my mother would cover her forehead with her fingertips and say, I see a difficult life for this child. Other times my father would bellow like the Wizard of Oz, this child will walk a hard road. In any case, my parents yanked me out of there. Before they left though, the grandmother gave my mother a ring and said it would help to protect me in life. The ring frightened my parents, but they figured all that turquoise and silver must be worth something, so they took it. That night there was another terrible desert storm, my parents told me, terrifying in its power. The thunder crashed and the lightning illuminated everything. Jess Goldberg? The teacher asked. Present, I answered. The teacher narrowed her eyes at me. What kind of name is that? Is that short for Jessica? I shook my head. No, ma'am. Jess, she repeated. That's not a girl's name. I dropped my head. Kids around me covered their mouths with their hands to stifle their giggles. Miss Sanders glared at them until they fell silent. Is that a Jewish name? She asked. I nodded, hoping she was finished. She was not. Class, Jess is from the Jewish persuasion. Jess, tell the class where you're from. I squirmed in my seat. The desert? What? Speak up, Jess. I'm from the desert. I could see the kids mugging it and rolling their eyes at each other. What desert? What state? She pushed her glasses higher on her nose. I froze with fear. I didn't know. The desert. I shrugged. Miss Sanders grew visibly impatient. What made your family decide to come to Buffalo? How should I know? Did she think parents told 6-year-old kids why they made huge decisions that would impact on their lives? We drove, I said. Miss Sanders shook her head. I hadn't made a very good first impression. Siren screamed. It was the Wednesday morning air raid drill. We crouched down under our desks and covered our heads with our arms. We were warned to treat the bomb like strangers. Don't make eye contact. If you can't see the bomb, it can't see you. There was no bomb. This is only practice for the real thing. But I was saved by the siren. I was sorry we moved from the warmth of the desert to this cold, cold city. Nothing could have prepared me for getting out of bed on a winter morning in an unheated apartment in Buffalo. Even warming our clothes in the oven before we put them on did not help much. After all, we still had to take our pajamas off first. Outside, the cold was so fierce that the wind carved up my nose and sliced into my brain. Tears froze in my eyes. My sister Rachel was still a toddler. I just remember a round snowseed swaddled with scarves and mittens and hat. No kids, just clothes. Even when I was bundled up in the dead of winter, with only a couple of inches of my face peeking out from the snowsuit hood and scarf. Adults would stop me and ask, "Are you a boy or a girl?" I dropped my eyes in shame, never questioning their right to ask. During the summer, there wasn't much to do in the projects, but there was plenty of time to do it. The projects, former Army barracks, now housed the military contracted aircraft workers and their families. All our fathers went to work in the same plant. All our mothers stayed home. Old man Martin was retired. He sat on a lawn chair on his porch listening to the McCarthy hearings on his radio. It was turned up so loud you could hear it all the way down the block. Gotta watch out, he'd tell me as I passed his house. Communists could be everywhere. Anywhere. Anywhere. I nod solemnly and went off to play. But old man Martin and I shared something in common. The radio is my best friend too. The Jack Benny Show and Fibber, Mickey, and Molly made me laugh, even when I didn't know what was so funny. The Shadow, the Whistler chilled me. The Shadow and the Whistler chilled me. Perhaps outside these projects, working families already had televisions, but not us. The streets of the project weren't even paved, just gravel and giant Lincoln logs to mark the parking. Very few new things came down our road. Ponies pulled the carts of the Iceman and the knife sharpener. On Saturday, they bought the ponies without the carts and sold brides for a penny. A penny also brought a chunk from the Iceman, chipped off with his ice pick. The ice was dense and slick and sparkled like a cold diamond that might never melt. When a television set first appeared in the projects, it was in the living room of the Mackenzies. All the children in the neighborhood begged our parents to let us go watch Captain Midnight on the Mackenzies' new television, but most of us were not allowed in their home. Although it was 1955, the neighborhood still had some invisible war stones from the fierce strike that had been settled in 1949, the year I was born. Mac Mackenzie had been a scab. Just the word itself was enough to make me shy away from their house. You could see traces of that word on front of their coal bin, even though it had been painted over with a slightly different shade of green. Years later, father still argued about the strike over kitchen tables and backyard barbecue grills. I overheard descriptions of such bloody strike battles. I thought World War II had been fought at the plant. At night, we'd drive my father to his shift. I used to crouch down on the back seat of the car and peek past the plant gates out over the now quiet fields of combat. There were also games in the projects, and the kids whose parents had scabs during the strike made up a small but fierce pack. Hey, Pansy, are you a boy or a girl? There was no way to avoid them in the small planet of the projects. Their sing-song taunts stayed with me long after I'd passed by. The world judged me harshly, and so I moved or was pushed toward solitude. The highway sliced between our projects and a huge field. It was against the rules to cross that road. There wasn't much traffic on it. You'd have to stand in the middle of a lane for a long time in order to get hit. But I wasn't supposed to cross that road. I did, though, and no one seemed to notice. I parted the long brown grass that bordered the road. Once I passed through it, I was on my own world. On the way to the pond, I stopped to visit the puppies and the dogs in the outside kennels connected to the back of the ASPCA building. The dogs barked and stood on their hind legs as I approached the fence. Shh, I warned them. I knew no one was supposed to be back here. A spaniel pushed his nose through the chain link fence. I rubbed his head. I looked around for the terrier I loved. He had only come to the fence once to greet me, sniffing cautiously. Usually, no matter how I coaxed, he lay with his paws between his legs, looking at me with mournful eyes. I wish I could take him home. I hoped he went to a kid that loved him. Are you a boy or a girl? I asked the mongrel. Ruff, ruff. I didn't see the ASPCA man until it was too late. Hey kid, what are you doing there? Caught. Nothing, I said. I wasn't doing anything bad. I was just talking to the dogs. He smiled a little. Don't put your fingers inside the fence, son. Some of them bite. I felt the tips of my ears grow hot. I nodded. I was looking for that little one with the black ears. Did a nice family take him? The man frowned for a moment. Yes, he said quietly. He's real happy now. I hurried to the pond to catch pollywogs on the jar. I leaned my elbow and looked up close at the little frogs and climbed up to the sun-baked rocks. Caw, caw! A huge black crow circled above me in the air and landed on a rock nearby. We looked at each other in silence. Crow, are you a boy or a girl? Caw, caw. I laughed and rolled over on my back. The sky was crayon blue. I pretended I was lying on the white cotton clouds. The earth was damp against my back. The sun was hot, the breeze was cool. I felt happy. Nature held me close and seemed to find no fault with me. On my way back to the fields, I passed the Scabby game. They had found an unlocked truck parked on an incline. One of the older boys disengaged the emergency brake and made two of the younger boys from my side of the project run under the truck as it rolled. Jessie, Jessie, they taunted as they walked toward me. Brian says you're a girl, but I think you're a sissy boy, one of them said. I didn't speak. Well, what are you? I flapped my arms. Caw, and I laughed. One of the boys knocked a jar filled with pollywogs from my hand and smashed on the gravel. I kicked and bit them, but they held me and tied my hands behind my back like with a piece of clothesline. Let's see how you tickle, one of the boys said as he knocked me down, and two of the others struggled to pull off my pants and my underpants. I was filled with horror. I couldn't make them stop. Ashamed of being half naked before them, the important half, took all the steam out of me. They pushed and carried me to old Miss Jefferson's house and locked me in the coal bin. It was dark in the bin. The coal was sharp and cut like knives. It hurt too much to lie still, but the more I moved, the worse it made the wounds. I was afraid I'd never get out. It took hours before I heard Miss Jefferson in the kitchen. I didn't know what she thought when she heard all the thumping and kicking in her coal bin, but when she opened the little trap door on the coal bin, I squirmed out onto her kitchen floor. She looked scared enough to fall down dead. There I stood, covered with coal soot and blood, tied up and half naked in her kitchen. She murmured curses under her breath and untied me and sent me home wrapped in a towel. I had to walk a block and knock on my parents' door before I found refuge. They were really angry when I saw me. I never understood why. My father spanked me over and over again until my mother restrained his arm with a whisper in her hand. A week later, I caught up with one of the boys from the Scabby game. He made the mistake of wandering alone too near our house. I made a muscle and I told him to feel it. Then I punched him in the nose. He ran away crying. I felt great for the first time in days. My mother called me to our house for dinner. Who was that boy you were playing with? I shrugged. You were showing him your muscle? I froze, wondering how much she had seen. She smiled. Sometimes it's better to let boys think they're stronger. She smiled. Sometimes it's better to let boys think they are stronger, she told me. I figured she was just plain crazy if she really believed that. The phone rang. I'll get it, my father called out. It was the parent of the kid whose nose I had bloodied. I could tell by the way my father glowered at me as he listened. I was so ashamed, my mother told my father. He glared at me in the real room mirror. All I could see were his thick black brows. My mother had been informed that I could no longer attend temple class unless I wore a dress, something I fought tooth and nail. At that moment, I was wearing a Roy Rogers outfit without my guns. It was hard enough being the only Jewish family in the projects without being in trouble with the temple. We had to drive a long time to go to the nearest synagogue. My father prayed downstairs. My mother, sister, and I had to watch from the balcony, like in the movies. It seemed like there weren't many Jews in the world. There were some on the radio, but none in my school. Jews weren't allowed on the playground. That's what the older kids told me, and they enforced it. We were nearing home. My mother shook her head. Why can't you be like Rachel? Rachel looked at me sheepishly. I shrugged. Rachel's dream was a felt skirt with applique noodle and rhinestone-studded plastic shoes. My father pulled our car to a stop in front of our house. You go straight to your room, young lady, and stay there. I was bad. I was going to be punished. My head ached with fear. I wish I could have found a way to be good. Shame suffocated me. It was almost sundown. I heard my parents call Rachel to join them in our bedroom to light the Shabbos candles. I knew the shades were drawn. A month before, we heard laughter and shouting outside the living room windows while my mother was lighting the candles. We raced to the windows and peered out into the dusk. Two teenagers pulled down their pants and mooned us. Kikes, they shouted. My father did not chase them away. He closed the drapes. After that, we started praying in our bedroom even with the shades pulled down. Everyone in my family knew about shame and fear. Soon after, my Roy Rogers outfit disappeared from the dirty clothes hamper. My father bought me an Annie Oakley outfit and said, "No," I shouted. I don't want to. I don't want to wear it. I feel stupid." My father yanked me by the arm. "Young lady, I spent $4.90 for this Anne Oakley outfit, and you're going to wear it." I tried to shake off his hand, but it was clamped painfully on my upper arm. Tears dripped down my cheeks. I want a Davy Crockett hat. My father tightened his grip. I said no. "But why?" I cried. "Everyone has one except me." "Why not?" His answer was inexplicable. "Because you're a girl."